It's great to have you here on the Clark Howard Show. You know, our mission is to serve you with advice and information that empowers you to make better financial decisions in your life. And I hope you've had an absolutely wonderful week. I have had a great week that's about to get so much better because it's time for our weekly Clark Stink segment, which teaches me so much. And I appreciate so much the post. Later, though, people are so freaked out about the automation that is increasingly in our vehicles on the road. I know it's not a popular position, but I want to tell you, technology is going to save so many lives, prevent so many accidents, and so many injuries. I want to tell you where that's moving towards with the vehicles on the road. But without further ado, it is time for Clark Stinks.
I should have never encouraged you to speak.
You must think I'm pretty stupid.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
Well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
Maybe you're right, pal.
Maybe you're right, pal. All right, we'll start with this one. I love you, man, but I heard you express disappointment in Sam's Club charging Plus customers $50 for what used to be free. I'm a Plus card holder. Very seldom have I ever ordered less than $50. I couldn't get perishables like eggs, meats, frozen items, etc. I'm in great health, but there are a growing number of us that are in bad health and need family or friends to take them if they're going to go shopping. I applaud Sam's for thinking outside the box, and they would be wise to advertise this innovation. Jerry.
So, Jerry, thank you. The change that Sam's made used to be if you paid for their Plus membership, their expensive membership, you had free delivery of most anything in the warehouse. And now you have to have a minimum $50 threshold. And so they made this change without cutting the cost of the membership or throwing in additional benefits. And what happens is once you have had a benefit for somebody, when you take it away, people are sore. And I found that I have abandoned my cart on a couple of occasions since the new pricing system went into place. And I think that's what Sam's wants. They'd rather have me order a larger amount that allows them to be profitable, or if those small orders were not profitable, they're happy for me to abandon my cart and not even make the purchase.
What is that stink? It must be Clark. I disagree strongly with your comment that the fewer miles you're on the road, regardless of your driver profile, the less chance you'll be in an accident. That is blatantly false. I live here in rural Pennsylvania with a 60-mile round-trip commute. I barely see cars on my drive, barely hit my brakes, and deer are my biggest fear. 10 years ago, I had a 24-mile round-trip commute and lived near Philadelphia. My commute was what was the locals call was on the sure to kill death way. I don't know how.
Schuylkill.
Is that how you say it? Schuylkill Expressway.
Yeah.
According to your logic, I should be charged a higher premium for my commute today than my Philadelphia commute based purely on miles. Please factor the type of driving before making generalizations, and thanks for all you do, Colin.
Colin, thank you. Let me explain, because maybe I didn't explain it well. So if you, with your the zip code where your premiums are set now, you started driving less and you were with a pay per mile insurer, you would have your base rate and then the pay per mile, and you would pay less. If you were still driving on the Schuylkill, which is such a dangerous road, and you started driving fewer miles, you were going on that commute fewer days a week, you would pay less. In that case, you started driving more, you pay more. It's all based on where you are that sets your risk level, and then ultimately you're paying per mile. So it's not really like apples and oranges with the two different commutes that you have had.
You smell like milk spilled in a Tesla after a week in the hot sun. You speak of runaway credit card debt and then bad-mouth debit cards. The truth is that credit cards are an insidious trap. If you don't pay off your cards in full when you're billed, you shouldn't use them. You've explained how to be safe with debit cards in the past, so stop making faces and choking sounds and help people understand how to avoid credit card debt. Steve.
So I don't know if you've heard me say that I've been on a journey about this because of the little bit more than half of people running balances on credit cards. Using a piece of trash fake Visa or fake MasterCard a debit card is an appropriate choice if someone knows if they use credit cards, they will run debts that they cannot pay each month, and then they're paying the huge interest rates. So I don't like the lack of consumer protections in a debit card. But if somebody is in a position where if they have credit, they're going to get in over their head, then I'm never going to be opposed to the good. And the perfect is somebody who pays their bills on a credit card, doesn't end up in trouble, and can use credit cards routinely because of the superiority of the protections with a credit card. But the problem with debt outweighs that, and you're right. Someone who has trouble controlling themselves with credit cards should use a debit card.
Clark, you made the point that umbrella insurance protects your assets if you have assets. However, you failed to state that umbrella insurance protects current and future income. There are many people who have not yet built up assets and yet more recently in their lives have increased their income. A judgment against someone could result in garnishment of their wages up to 25%, and they will not be able to file bankruptcy with their income at that higher level. Imagine being strapped down for many years with 25% of your pay garnished. Talk about demoralizing. Umbrella insurance protects against it, and it's especially important for those who are retired with substantial pensions but few assets. David,
thank you. All right. So I'm going to get cold here, all right? Usually someone who does not have a lot of assets is not a big target for lawsuits. And so the risk level you face for lawsuits is tiny. A lot of contingency lawyers, when they see, the only insurance there is this much, this person has no assets, they don't take the case. You're much less subject to the risk of big judgments when you don't have a lot. Then on the other hand, as I can tell you from talking to lawyers, when somebody gets a huge judgment against them, doesn't have a lot of assets and faces a wage garnishment, they do at that point file bankruptcy. I mean, that's the fact. So an umbrella, you can't insure against everything. An umbrella policy is best purchased in most cases at the point at which someone has significant, meaningful assets.
You recently told a listener not to fall for the free phone scam with one of the big cell phone providers because they lock you in for 3 years. Why not? You get to pay an interest-free loan that you can cancel at any time and just have to pay the balance you owe on the phone to get out. It seems like a smart money move to me. Love the show, Greg.
Greg, that is a very valid point. To this point, you're not counting in consumer behavior. When people have one of these scammy payment plans at 0% with Verizon, AT&T, or T-Mobile, they psychologically feel like they're locked in and they can't go anywhere. What you said is actually very smart advice. It's key that you know that even if you were in this handcuff with AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, that you say, I try to say them in different orders when I say the three big bad guys. Anyway, if you are in one of these 0% plans and you feel like, well, I can't possibly give that up, you're missing the gold in the marketplace, which are plans that are a tiny fraction of the cost with the same service from the big three, just by being willing to be flexible. So if somebody does what you said, perfect. Most people, though, once they're in that payment plan, they feel like they're locked down.
You missed the mark regarding your insights about Gen X and their lack of retirement savings. As with everything else, Gen X has fallen through the cracks. The majority of us are too young for pensions, yet too old to make any kind of meaningful money through 401ks or IRAs. It was hammered into us that a minimum of a 4-year college degree was the only way for success, so most of us had to take out loans. Now those loans are being repaid. Throw in nearly grown children who are trying to make their way in a vastly different, more expensive world than prior generations. These children often need financial support to navigate basic living expenses, and add to that many of us are navigating aging parents, most of whom also need financial help with their increasing care needs. Forget the sandwich generation. Gen X is the spread too thin generation. Please take a moment to consider the why before making generalized statements about an entire subsection of the population. We have enough going on without being reminded that there will be very little left once we finish taking care of everyone else. Bonnie.
Bonnie, so I must not have properly made the point when I talked about the financial crunch that Gen X has. And again, we're talking generalities when we talk about different inflection points with each generation. But what happened was Gen Xers grew up overwhelmingly in families where a pension was the key of being able to have financial security later in life. And there was no reason that a Gen Xer would think otherwise. They were never taught in the family growing up about the importance of building your own retirement plans from a very young age, because that was not the experience of the parents in the household they grew up in. So Gen X is kind of in a unique situation that many Gen Xers are in a really tough bind, because the expectations you grew up with are not the reality, as you pointed out so eloquently.
Mr. Howard, Clark just won't suffice here. A caller asked about a $50 fee associated with his 401k. You explained the expense overhead and dismissed it as a junk fee. You missed an opportunity to explain how lucky he is to have a fixed fee instead of a fee based on an account value. When that account has 6 figures in it, he will absolutely be thrilled to pay $50 a year. My 401k a few employers ago charged an 8 basis point management fee. My last employer had a flat $25 a year fee at Fidelity, so fund expenses were also low. With an account balance of almost $400K, I'm saving nearly $300 a year with a flat fee versus asset-based fee. I could roll into an IRA, but I would then lose the ERISA protection. I look at the $25 a year as cheap insurance. Brian,
that's a very, very good point. And most employers, 401k plan administrators, are charging a flat fee. It is outside the normal box that you had an employer plan that was charging you the 8 basis points, which means as your balance rises, you are paying higher and higher fees on top of the expense ratios of the funds. That is really not the way it should be done.
Okay. Clark, you don't stink on this issue, but when talking about auto insurance as a personal injury lawyer, I want to point out the huge importance of people making sure they have both uninsured motorist coverage and underinsured motorist coverage. In most states, uninsured motorist coverage is usually required if you have a policy of insurance, so that's not really an issue. But underinsured coverage isn't required in many states, and because of that, a lot of people don't have it. As an injury lawyer, I see regularly where someone is injured by a person carrying the state minimum required amount 15 to 35K, and if they don't have underinsured coverage and they sustain a life-altering injury, that's all the money there is. And that's from Eric.
Eric, your point is 100% valid. It depends on the state. Auto insurance rules are set by each state, not as a 50-state thing. And in some states, when you have uninsured motorist, it is both in combination. It's called uninsured motorist, but it's both un and under. In states that don't have them all in one, your point is completely true. You want to have both un and under, because under is the bigger risk than un. And the reason it's such a risk is exactly as you pointed. Some states, the liability minimums are so teeny tiny, you're left fully exposed in an accident that is not your fault at all.
All right, one more for you here. Clark doesn't stink. In fact, he's coming up roses after recommending microwaving ice cream from the freezer for 10 to 20 seconds before eating it. What a revelation. I eat ice cream most nights after dinner, and the experience has been significantly enhanced since I started doing this. Thank you, Jacob.
Now, Jacob, that was not from me. That was from my wife. Lane is the one who, we have a freezer that freezes things really rock solid hard. And if you're waiting to be able to eat the ice cream, I mean, you might have another birthday before you can eat it. And so she came up with this of being able to microwave. That was not a Clark original at all. So thank you for all your posts. And I think about how deeply people think about these topics, and you have people from with particular expertise who chime in, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time, because I'm just one guy, and we all learn from each other together. Coming up straight ahead, there's something that people have really teed off at me about on Clark Stinks. It's when I talk with great enthusiasm about automation in automobiles where they at least partially drive themselves. And I'm driving people crazy about that again, straight ahead. Okay. I admit, for the last 7 years, I've oversold the ability of a car to drive itself. I'm a very early adopter, and when I had the privilege of having a Tesla with the early autopilot, it was rough. Now, the newest version is ridiculously good, and dare I say, drives better than I do on balance by a meaningful amount in city traffic, suburban traffic, and on the freeway. Hands down, is incredibly better as a driver than I am. Is it perfect? No. But you think about how people are like, I don't think I could do that. I can't imagine just sitting there and letting the vehicle drive. But a lot of this stuff creeps in on us. Now, at this point, you have a vehicle that warns you that you're going to run into the car in front of you with an alert. Think how many accidents that has prevented. Think about the vehicles that have effective automatic emergency braking and prevent you from running into that vehicle in front of you, that will sense before you do that traffic is rapidly slowing or coming to a stop in front of you and keeps you from hitting that vehicle. How about the simple stuff where the vehicle warns you when you're lane changing that, hey, there's a vehicle you didn't see in your blind spot, prevents an accident? How many times since you got one of the systems that gives you the audible warning have you avoided an accident you would have been in otherwise? These are all various forms of automation. How about the rudimentary lane departure systems that a lot of vehicles have, that if you start to stray out of your lane, the vehicle will actually pull you back into your lane, kind of grab electronically the steering wheel from you and keep you out of harm's way. These are all forms of automation. And if you don't want to have the vehicle driving for you, fine, that's your choice. But more and more vehicles now drive phenomenally well without your assistance on freeways. I promise, on a long freeway trip, if you have a vehicle that has full self-driving kind of automation, whatever each automaker calls it, you will be, as you learn to relax with it, start on a rural freeway, you will see that the vehicle drives better through the hours of a road trip than you do. It just is a fact. But even if you're not willing to give up all that, do you know, because of IoT, the Internet of Things, how we're getting into a point with what's called mesh, where internet capability will be pretty much everywhere in the thin air, that vehicles are going to have sensors that are going to allow vehicles to talk to each other. And I'm not talking about something in 2040. I'm not talking about 2035. I'm talking about this decade. We're going to see more and more vehicles that are able themselves to prevent an accident by having communication with each other. And this is not weird stuff. This is absolutely fantastic stuff that is going to save lives. And speaking of saving lives, there was the tragic accident in San Francisco with one of the fully automated vehicles, no driver, but it's kind of like an Uber without drivers. And there are accidents every day, but that one, because it was done by essentially robotics, was a huge deal in California and around the country. And it was tragic. But the thing is that fully automated vehicles, I've been in one. I was in one in Las Vegas at the Consumer Electronics Show. They like it to be called CES now. I was in one in 2019, I guess it was. I was in one, which was pretty early. And I was in this robotic vehicle driving all over Las Vegas completely by itself. I was sitting in the back seat, and the vehicle was driving itself. And we've had this for a good while in the Phoenix metro area, in certain parts of Phoenix and I think Mesa, where people can take a app-based car ride and be able to ride around without a driver. And this technology is going to continue to spread. The big news, though, to me, is we tragically lose over 40,000 lives each year, with hundreds of thousands of people injured each year in road accidents. And we are on the edge, step by step, of that both fatality rate and accident rate continuing to drop. You know, it's funny, in vehicles that have the lane departure system, there's a button you can turn it off. When I get in rental vehicles that have it, inevitably, a prior renter has turned it off. They didn't like the feel that you have in your hands on the steering wheel when the car takes over and brings the car solidly back in the lane of traffic. Big mistake. Big mistake.
Big, huge. Okay, John in Connecticut says, you briefly discussed putting an e-lock on your social security number. I've never heard of this. Can you please elaborate? And so, we had a few people write in about this.
Yeah, because I talked about this on the podcast and apparently did a really poor job explaining it.
We've now written an article about it, too, because we got so much feedback.
I mean, it was surprising what a response this generated in people. Okay, so there's a federal process called E-Verify, because we have a lot of people who are working in the United States without legal right to work. So E-Verify is a procedure where an employer who is considering hiring a prospective employee can verify that they are legally allowed to work in the United States, which has led to a big uptake in people using someone else's social security number who legitimately is allowed to work in the United States, could be you or me, to put through the E-Verify, and then they're able to work. And then all of a sudden, you might at the end of a year get a W-2 for income that you never earned because you never worked at the job, and the IRS expects you to report the income. So there is now the equivalent of credit freeze, if you will, for E-Verify, and it is a pretty simple process, and we've got an explanation for you how to do it at Clark.com. It'll be really fast and really easy. When you are applying for a job, you're then going to have to basically unfreeze your E-Verify.
Mark in North Carolina says, I purchased a certified used car 3 months ago, but after a couple of weeks realized that the certified pre-owned warranty was never applied to my vehicle through Acura Finance. I contacted the manager several times, and he keeps saying he will apply the warranty, but nothing ever happens. I'm worried that too much time will pass and my claim will be minimized. Is there anything I can do to persuade them to honor the extended warranty?
Okay, Mark, I don't know why. We had a a large number of complaints about this many years ago. You're the first person I've heard from with this in years and years. So I don't know if there's financial problems at this dealership or what is going on, but you say you've contacted. You've not said, and maybe you have, by email that shows there's a timestamp that it's clear. I hope you've got something you can go back to, like the paperwork says on it when you purchase that you were buying a CPO, certified pre-owned, on an Acura. So also, I don't know, and you've not said if you contacted Acura itself yet. They have a vested interest in this because the CPO programs are really important for the luxury brands to be able to hold up resale values. And when so often the luxury brands, the initial owner was not an owner, they were doing a lease, usually for 3 years, and it saves the automakers a lot of money if the vehicle, when it goes back in the market, sells at a good price. It makes the lease more profitable for the manufacturer. So everybody, including you, except maybe this dealer, has a lot of interest in seeing that the CPO that was marketed to you actually does happen. So I want you to contact Acura immediately and get on record with them. You'll have like a case number assigned to you or whatever they do. And I want you papering over the equivalent in the modern era, this general manager with email. And you said this general manager is, you just said manager. I want you to look up, you can find online, what chain owns this location, Mark, that you bought the Acura at. And I want you to contact the home office of the chain. You know, most car dealerships are no longer independently owned. They are owned by very large, either publicly traded or privately held chains. And so this problem you're having with this localized manager needs to go to the home office. If you find out, though, in your research that this is still owned by an individual or a family, you contact one of the family members and you say you're having this problem. And I expect it's not clear which of these steps will get this taken care of to your satisfaction. You don't know. This is a little bit throwing spaghetti at the wall, but it will work almost always unless the dealership is run by crooks. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend this weekend. And if you just happened upon our podcast or you listen occasionally, I hope you'll take the time to subscribe there, or if you're watching our YouTube show, that you do, in fact, follow us on YouTube. And I hope that day after day, the content you watch or the content you listen to turns out to be useful and valuable in your life. And what's most important to me is that we provide you information in a format, in a form that you can act on. There's so much in life that it feels like we got caught up in the details. And my thing is I like to take a machete to the roadblocks that'll come in to you trying to solve a problem or do something that's advocating for yourself and get there as easily as possible. So have a great, great weekend. Enjoy my NFL if you're a fellow NFL fan. If you like watching college football, enjoy it. But whatever you enjoy doing on the weekend, take time for yourself, your family, and your friends. And I'll see you Monday.